dry yourself off with a towel on Shabbos Yontif if you take a cold shower. You're not allowed to take a warm shower. That's a gzeira, but the cold shower, and you can towel yourself off. The Tanya. Mistabik Adam Baluntis. You can dry yourself off with a towel, and you can put it in the window. You can't squeeze it out, but you can put it in the window so that it'll dry up. Loyim serena yarin. You should not give it to the launderers because they'll squeeze it out. They'll launder it. So you can carry it home. We're not worried that you're going to squeeze it out on the way home. We said that if you have a balcony overlooking water, you can create a hole in the balcony, and you have these hanging mechitzos that create a mechitza all the way down to the water. And therefore, even though a water is a carmelis, and you're in a Rishus HaYachid, and normally you can't transfer from a carmelis to your Rishus HaYachid by creating these hanging walls. In essence, it creates a Rishus HaYachid where the water is, and the Chachamim were allowed you to, but that's only lamalois, to fill up a pail of alishpoch, but to dump your waste, asur. So that's not permitted, because the river will take it away beyond the mechitza, and then it's a problem. We're going to learn in the next Mishnah that if you have a chutzner and you want to dump your wastewater, you have to create like an outhouse, like a ditch where you dump it, so that it gets absorbed by the ground. It doesn't run out to the Rishus HaRabim. So but if you make a bore, so why can you dump it in the bore, even though it might go out to Rishus HaRabim eventually? So, and how come here we're concerned about dumping waste? So the Gemara says, "Hani taimi."
Ernie.
It gets absorbed. Here, the waste gets absorbed by the ground, so it's not a problem.
Ernie.
When you dump it in the ocean, it flows away. Hani loy taimi. Yes.
Ernie.
Yes.
Yeah. You go to the bathroom. You don't know where the waste goes. You flush it down the toilet, right?
If it doesn't go to Rishus HaRabim.
How do you know that?
What kind of it doesn't go to Rishus? Eventually goes out to the ocean, which is a carmelis at most, but it doesn't go directly there. It goes to a sewage treatment plant. It's not a Rishus HaRabim. Remember, when they dumped something, and we're going to see next Mishnah, when they dumped something in the chutzner, it flowed out to the Rishus HaRabim, or it could, if you didn't produce something to make sure that it gets absorbed.
I'm not convinced. When you go to the toilet in some place, right? Let's say you're in a place where there's no eruv around the town, and you go to the toilet, right? You go to the toilet. You're in a Rishus HaYachid. You go to the toilet. There's no eruv. There's no eruv. You go to a hotel.
But the water goes into a pipe underneath the ground. It's also rishus. It's a makam ptur. It's not it doesn't go into a rishus. The piping is less than 4 by 4 tfachim. It's a makam ptur.
Okay.
It's not even a carmelism. It's underground. Remember, anything above 10 tfachim in Rishus HaRabim is a makam ptur. Now, what about underground? It's probably the same concept. I don't know for sure. I never heard of makam ptur underground, but it's certainly. Now you can ask. Sewage eventually flows to the ocean. The ocean is a carmelis, but we see though that Chazal were makel by water. So it's a good question. Let's say we have to evaluate. We have to evaluate where we can see that, where we can find the answer to that question. why it's not obviously it's not a problem. Although I do remember the Chazon Ish, those in Bnei Brak who followed the Chazon Ish, they were very machmir about toilets on Shabbos too. But I'm not sure it was for that reason. But the Chazon Ish people didn't flush toilets on Shabbos.
Really?
Yeah, but I'm not sure it has to do with this.
That's a scary thought.
I have to look that. I remember some. I remember a chumrah like that. Oh, you're eating a banana? Very nice. Don't say, like you tried to say before, that when you're in a balcony, you can drop water up, but you can't dump waste out. Rather, it's permitted to dump the waste out. So pshita, hainu uka. It's the same as the cesspool that you're going to dump into. So why should that be a big chiddush? Mao the same, honey, tiny, vinyl, tiny. Yeah, but by the cesspool, the ground absorbs everything. Here it doesn't absorb. So I might have thought that it's prohibited. Kamash one that is permitted. So in fact, the Shulchan Aruch paskins mutar lishpoch ela chalal shebegzustra kashem shemutar lamalos derech sham. We paskin like the second lashon in the Gemara to be makel regarding if you have a balcony overlying an ocean, you could dump your wastewater if you make a hole in the balcony. V'chein shnei gzustras. Zu keneged zu. We have two balconies. One is higher than the other. They're close to each other. The higher one made a hole in the balcony to draw water up. And we say that on Ravun Amarav lo yishanu lebesmucha. That they have to make an eruv if they're close to each other, because then it's like then it's as if they have to make an eruv between the two of them for the people in the lower balcony to use the water from the upper balcony. Aval b'mufleges, and technically both balconies would be usher without the eruv. But this Gemara is saying, though, if they were far apart, more than 4 tefachim apart, then the Elyona Muteres, then the upper balcony can do its own thing without an eruv. Of course, the lower balcony cannot, but the upper balcony can. How does the lower balcony get access to the upper balcony? Through throwing in the air a bucket. Well, Rav already said that if the way that you join with your colleague chaver is only through zrika, through the avir, then that's not as if you have shared ownership, and therefore you don't aser without a neighbor. Gezel b'Shabbos. If a person is squatting in somebody's ruin, let's say a person has a house that's a destroyed house, and like a squatter is sleeping there. So the din is yesh gazel b'Shabbos. He's a gazlan. He's allowed to use it on Shabbos, just like if a gazlan steals something, he's basically koine it and can use it. So here he can use it as well. However, churba machzor l'bailim, every Shabbos, even though the owner of this churva doesn't use it, it goes back to the bailis, and therefore the guy who's squatting there cannot use it without being ma'arev with you. He has to return it to the bailim on Shabbos. So where says hagufa kash? I understand. Amrit yesh gezel b'Shabbos al makanya. The guy who's squatting there, if you say yesh gezel, a gazlan is koine. So then, if he's koine it, churba masur l'bailim amaloi kanya. So what do you mean that he has to return it to the bailim, implying that the bailim still has ownership? So what do you mean yesh gezel? What says hachi korah? Yesh din gezel b'Shabbos. Okay, so the churba masur l'bailim, that is, he can use it. But use of it on Shabbos is still called gezel, and he's not zoicha without an eruv with the original bailim. Amar Rabba umuzvinin hashmaitzim. And we're going to ask a kasha from the case of Shnei Gzusteris. Now, if there's Gezel Bezabis, and you can't be mishtamish with somebody else's rishus, and he's not coining all of the chusim in that area. So namay asuros. And why do we say that the two balconies asur? I mean, the bottom balcony doesn't have rishus to use the upper balcony. So why should they asur on the upper balcony? You know why? The lower balcony has to make an eruv with the other because they participated in building the mechitzos for the upper balcony. So nami. So maybe the upper ones also participated in the building of the mechitzos below, and they should aser as well. So kiven da aser l'tachtoina. No, once the lower people made their own mechitzah, gilu gali daita da ana barach lo nichale. The lower people said we want nothing to do with the upper one. So they that was a simon that they separated completely, and therefore they do what they want and they do what they want, and they don't participate together. Mishnah. So chotzer ship chusim arba ames. You have a courtyard that's small; it's less than 4 by 4 ames. Ein shoichlin b'soich hamayim b'Shabbos, and you have wastewater. You can't dump it into the chotzer on Shabbos. Elim kenasu la'uka machzeches asayim and anekev l'mata. Unless you build like a ditch or like an outhouse, yeah, like an opening in the ground that will be able to hold 2 saw. That is, the ground will absorb it, so that when you dump the wastewater out, it won't automatically flow into the Rishus HaRabim. And that's beini b'chutz, maybe 15, no matter where the opening is. If the opening is from the outside, you have to cover it. Biv is like a tunnel, that's covered. Then you could if you have a pipe that extends from the chosr to the Rishus HaRabim, if it's covered for the first arba amitz Rishus HaRabim, you're allowed to do it. Because people see it, they won't know for sure that it's coming from you. Even from the roof, or a chotzer that's 100 by 100 amas, you can't dump it into this conduit directly, because they say it's going to go directly to the Rishus HaRabim. However, doing it in a stepwise fashion, you dump it on the roof, and then it flows down into the thing secondary. A chotzer v'achzandra, a chotzer and a patio, mitzarfin la'arba amis. For this din of if you have a certain size chotzer, you can dump wastewater. You can add a chotzer and an achzandra together. L'chein shnei diuto zu keneged zu. These are like 2 little rooms. One opposite the other. These are balconies. And the chotzer is psucha from the balcony. 4 amas in front of it. And they combine together. Also, it will be combined. Now, let's say somebody in the chotzer made one of these outhouses. Miktasan asu uka, umiktasan lo asu uka, esha asu uka mutorin. The ones that made it can use it. Esha lo asu uka cannot dump wastewater asur. Now, my time, what is this that they created less than arba amoy? By arba amoys, you can't dump the wastewater. Rava, and they should adam also listapik sasai mayim b'chol yom. Person uses 2 saw of water every day. Arba amois, adam roitzel azalfa. If it's arba amois, that size, they'll use the wastewater so that the dust, there won't be so much dust, and that really he wants to spread the water around here is for his benefit. He doesn't want it to go out to the Rishus Harabim. So Memel, if it goes out to the Rishus Harabim, he's not having kavanah for that. But Pachos Ma'arba Shoifchan. So this, the person will be shoifech to try to get it out. It'll flow to Rishus Harabim. So that's why if it's less than Arba Amos, either Avid Uka, if he made a hole in the ground where he would dump it first and the ground absorbs it, Shari, Elo Aser. But if it's great, if the Chatzar is 4 by 4 Amos, you don't need to make an Uka, you could just dump it into the Chatzar. Rav Zera Amar Arba Amos Taimi. He says the reason why it's not a problem if your Chatzar is Arba by Arba is because such a large area, the ground will absorb it before it gets to the Rishus Harabim. Pachos Marba Amos Loi Taimi. Now, my binai, what's the nafkamina between these two reasons? Amar Abaya, Orech v'kotnik binai. For example, it's not square, 4 by 4, but let's say it's 8 by 2. Rashi, Kagon sheyesh l'shmon amos al shtayim. The ikka karka kashir arba. You have the same amount of volume as 4 by 4. And therefore, yeshmokum livolos asayim. Therefore, you have enough ground to absorb 2 saw. Aval zalef ein ruya, but to spread water so it won't raise dust, that only works if it's square. So Tana, we learn in the Mishnah. Chotzer v'achzandra, we said you can combine a chotzer and a patio for the shear of la'arba amis. So Bishmal Rab Zera, who said it relates to absorption or not, nicha. Ela l'rabba, where it has nothing to do with preventing dust, kasha. How does Rabbah explain? This Alexandra sort of fronts the whole chutzner, and therefore that whole chutzner you could potentially want to dump water there to prevent dust from rising, like Rabbah's shita. Toshma chutzner shein ba'arba amis al arba amos, a chutzner that's less than 4 by 4. So ain't you can't dump wastewater directly there. So Bishmal Rabba Nicha. Because such a small area, you're not worried about ziluf, this dust. El Rab Zera, but Rab Zera's issue of taimi, kasha. Guys, I'm teaching here. That's Rabbanan. Umastis Rabbi Yezer ben Yaakov, it's machlokes tanoim, that they one holds one way and Rabbi Yezer holds the other way. Umay duchke de Rabbi Zera look umastis Rabbi Yezer ben Yaakov. What forced Rabbi Zera to set up the mission like a das yochid Rabbi Yezer ben Yaakov? Amar Rava, the mastishin itself was kshisi. My area, the Tony Chotzer Shipchu. So why use the phrase Chotzer that is smaller? Listni. Chotzer shein ba'arba amis al arba amis. Elalav shmami nad Rabbi Yezer ben Yaakov he. That Baraisa is going like Rabbi Yezer ben Yaakov. Because remember, the Chachamim hold the loy shorle mishum shir makom bli asamayim. They say that it relates to the absorption capacity of the ground. Because, like he said, afilu bib mea amalo yishpach l'tochu ela gagol hachotzer alma. Time to do mishum zilu food. It's not because of absorption, it's because of spreading water so dust won't rise. Well, Yezer ben Yaakov doesn't hold like that. Freit to Gemara, Ba'amid is safer Rabbi Yezer ben Yaakov, Reisha love Rabbi Yezer ben Yaakov. If the safe is Rabbi Yezer, then Reisha cannot be Rabbi Yezer. Or says, no, Kula Rabbi Yezer ben Yaakov. And the Chesuri Mechsra, there's some words missing. V'hachi Ktani, this I have to read the Mishnah. If it's less than 4 by 4, you can't dump wastewater because it's going to flow directly to Rishus Harabim. But if it is arba, you can. Rabbi Yezer ben Yaakov Oimer, biba komer. If you have a ditch that goes from the chotzer to the Rishus Harabim, and There's arba amos of it in Rishus Harabim covered. Shoyf can l'soicha mayim b'Shabbos, because he's not worried about the gzeir that people are going to see, and they're going to be suspicious that he's dumping water from Rishus Hayochid Rishus Harabim because it's covered, and therefore you see he's not worried about this issue of absorption. Rabbi Yezer ben Yaakov Omer Biba Komer Masdisen Deloike Chananya. Our mission is not like Chananya. The time Chananya Omer Afilu Gag Mea Ama. Even if you have a roof, 100 amas lo yishpoch. Lefishena Gag Oser Levloya Lekaleach. A roof doesn't absorb; it just dumps. It's going to go directly to Sarabim. Tana, we learn a Mishnah about Medvar Mamor and Bimosachamo. All of this is operative in the summer. Aval Bimosak Shamim, where he's not worried about dust. It's muddy anyways. Shoifech v'shoin v'enimah. You can dump whatever you want because it's already muddy. My time. Because since it's muddy already, he just wants the water to be absorbed there. He doesn't want it to flow out. He doesn't care if the water is there because it's muddy anyways. But by wastewater, where a man wants it to be absorbed, uktani lo yishpach, yet it says l'chadchila you shouldn't do it. Because by winter, what do we worry? Imishum kilkul chatzer miskalkul v'kaima. To ruin the chutz, it's already ruined. It's already muddy. Imishum gzer Hashem yomer tzinoy rois shel ploy nekalech maim. Or people, if they see it coming out of the Rishus Harabim, they'll say, "Oh, this guy's pipe, he's dumping water from Rishus Hayochid to Rishus Harabim." Stam tzinoros mekalchem. Every pipe flows. So they're not going to just worry about him. So that's why there's no gzeira. Now, Rav Nachman says pumfakir, just the opposite. B'mosak shame uka machzik society. That if you have a outhouse that can hold two saws, so then nice lo sasayim. So he's allowed to dump sasayim. If it holds saw, machzik saw, nice lo saw. B'mosak in the summer, machzik sasayim, nice lo sasayim. In the summer, if the outhouse holds two, he can give him two. But saw a nice lo koliker. But one saw, they don't give him anything. Why not? If the outhouse holds one, why don't you give him one? Why? Because if you give him one, he'll dump two, and it'll be overflow. So if that's the case, so be goyzer in the winter as well. So why should we be goyzer? What should we be worried? It's in winter when it rains. The muddy courtyard's already muddy. Therefore, Abai says you can dump whatever you want. During winter time, you can dump in the chutz or whatever you want, even if it isn't arba al arba, whatever you need. Like the last statement of Abai. That's how the Shulchan Aruch paskins. These two like dwelling places in the chutzner. Rav Afilu Irvu means even if they made an eruv. What did it say in the Mishnah? Shnei duto zu keneged zu. That each one, if they made an uka, the guy can dump. If he didn't make an uka, he can't dump. Well, I understand. Even if they made an eruv, why not? Rava. Because there's going to be too much water if they're all going to use it, it's going to overflow. Whether it's a uka, whether it's a stream or a pond, even though they're already filled with water from Erev Shabbos, we're not concerned about like overflow. So how do you explain? When do we say that the guy who didn't build an uka can't use the other guy's uka? That's when they did not make an eruv. Aval eruv, if they made an eruv, mutorim. And the chilo eruv my time alone. What is the prohibition? What is the prohibitional factor if they didn't make an eruv? Ravashi gzeira. Maybe they'll take kalim from the house there for example, to dump into the Uka. But they did make an Eruv, they can't carry stuff from the house into the Eruv. So, Hadalach Ketchet Mishtatfin, Hadalach Ketchet Mishtatfin, Hadalach Ketchet Mishtatfin. Tomorrow will be pay test.